Welcome back to the Knights Book Club podcast. My name is Mason Knight. Sitting across from me is my sister, Kylie Knight. Yes, this is episode 8 of the Knights Book Club. We are back again. Once again, you guys are getting a special bonus episode this week. This is probably a Wednesday. This will be dropping. So we're going to be doing 2 books this week, 2 books next week, and then we will finish out this series the week after. And we are now on the second book of the Stillhouse Lake 5-part series of the book named Killman Creek by Rachel Caine. The date published for this was December 12th, 2017, so shortly after Stillhouse Lake. The author background, we have talked about this in the first one, but Kylie will just kind of glance over it again. So without further ado, but before we do that, if you guys can please be sure to smash that like button, comment below, subscribe to the channel, and hit that bell notification as we drop book reviews here every single week. You guys can find our podcast on audio format. If video is not suitable for you, you can find us on Spotify, Apple Podcast, Amazon Music, iHeartRadio, FM radio, literally anywhere you get your podcast. So with that said, Kylie, do you want to give a little bit of the background on Rachel Caine?
Sure. She has a bachelor's degree in accounting from Texas Tech University. She minored in music, and she used to be a professional musician with Henry Mancini?
Yeah, sure.
I can never say his name. Peter Nero and John Williams.
Yes, and if you notice my Star Wars tattoos, pretty tremendous here. Gotta love it. Got to love it.
In 2018, unfortunately, Rachel was diagnosed with soft tissue sarcoma. She passed away on November 1st, 2020.
Yeah, very, very sad. Luckily she was, according to my understanding, able to finish this series.
Yes.
But very sad turn of events, fairly young, not even in her 60s. So condolences to the family, of course, of Rachel Caine. Very sad. The page count for this was 348 pages. The audible time for this is sitting right around 12 hours. The genre, thriller, suspense, psychological fiction. Yes. And now I will jump into the synopsis. This is Kylie's favorite part of the podcast. All right, here I'm getting into my synopsis voice. Every time Gwen closed her eyes, she saw him in her nightmares. Now her eyes are open, and he's not going away. Gwen Proctor won the battle to save her kids from her ex-husband, serial killer Melvin Royal, and his league of psychotic accomplices. But the war isn't over. Not since Melvin broke out of the prison. Not since she received a chilling text. You're not safe anywhere now. Her refuge at Stillhouse Lake has become a trap. Gwen leaves her children in the protective custody of the fortified, well-armed neighbor, now with the help of Sam Cade, brother of one of Melvin's victims. Gwen is going hunting. She's learned from one of the sickest killers alive, but what she's up against is beyond anything she's feared. A sophisticated and savage mind game calculated to destroy her. As trust beyond her small circle of friends begins to vanish, Gwen has only fury and vengeance to believe in as she closes in on her prey. And sure as night, one of them will die.
Oh, my word.
I'm getting better at it.
You're so dramatic.
I know, but I love reading dramatic summaries. So yes, as we have talked about, this is the second book, Killman Creek. We are just going to jump right into this because you guys kind of know the gist now if you're following along. This book, Kylie, obviously leading into book 2, before we kind of jump into the summary, how excited were you on a scale of 1 to 10 to start this second book? Oh. And what were your kind of overall expectations?
Oh, I was stoked. When I was doing overtime, I texted you. I was like, we have to buy the rest of the books. We have to buy them. Literally, the second you told me that they were in the Audible library, I immediately started it. Mm-hmm. I was like, Lisa, we can't talk anymore. I have to listen to this book.
Well, I could definitely tell you were into it because, I don't think that's ever happened where you're like, we need to buy more Audible credits. We got to finish this series. So I was like, and this was before I even listened to the first book. So I was like, okay, if Kylie likes it, this is going to be a fun podcast.
I love these books. My expectations were so high. And I literally had no idea what was going to happen. Even throughout the book, I was like, what is going to happen?
Yeah.
And I finished it very quickly.
Yes.
I cranked the audible time or the audible speed way high.
Uh-huh.
I was like, I have to know.
Yeah, so for me, it took to get through 2 books, which is about 22 hours, took me about 9.5 hours to finish both books at like 2.5 speed. Because again, a lot like you, I wanted to get through this. And if you guys watch the podcast, if you know, I'm a big fantasy guy. So I'm going through the Stormlight archives for Brandon Sanderson right now. And holy moly, wow, incredible writing. Cannot wait to review some Brandon Sanderson on this podcast, but we're easing into that a little bit. You know, we're kind of doing a bunch of different genres, which I like, and eventually we're going to have playlists on our YouTube so you can find certain genres, because we've done romance at this point, we've done science fiction, we've done thriller mysteries.
Okay, we've only done one romance.
Well, we've only done one science fiction too, but you know, I want to start making categories once we build our review library. All right, let's jump into this.
Okay.
12 days after Melvin's escape from prison, Gwen decides she has finished running from him. She leaves her children, Atlanta/Lanny and Connor, under the protection of Javier Espinarza and Kenzia Claremont, and sets out Kezia. What did I say? Kenzia? I'm so dumb. Kezia. I don't know why that name's so hard for me. It's like the easiest name. Set down to track Melvin. Okay. And at this point, everyone is kind of starting to believe her. They're starting to believe that, you know, obviously now with Graham being from book 1, everyone, but Graham being this psychotic copycat killer who's kind of a part of this evil organization, they're starting to kind of trust Gwen more. / Gina, you guys know by now.
But not very much.
But not very much. No. But Sam, this was a really big developing part in book 2. Gwen is at her ends meet, right? Like she's at the end of the rope. Like she is just over all of this. You know, she still now has to deal with Mel, and Mel just escaped from prison at the very, very end of book 1, right?
Yeah.
So this is 12 days after all of this. She's trying to assess the situation and all of this craziness going on. So she decides, you know, I'm not going to be the victim here anymore. I was the victim, unbeknownst to her at the time, but she was the victim of Mel and all these horrible atrocities that he was doing. And she decides very on in book 2 that I will no longer be the victim. Instead, I'm going to be the one hunting Mel. And she gives everything up. And, you know, during the first book, Mikhaili, there was a lot of romantic development. It was very, I don't want to use the word platonic, but you know, Sam still has his reservations about Gwen. He wants to think she's a good person and all this stuff. So Sam actually agrees to go with her to hunt down, you know, Mel, the evil serial killer ex-husband of hers. Because also he's got stake in the game too, right? I mean, his sister was also killed by Mel, and he wants nothing more.
He wants justice to be served.
Exactly.
And Melvin's on death row.
Yes, Melvin is on death row.
Yeah.
Row.
And it's a bit ridiculous, even nowadays. Death row, like you can be on death row for years and years and years, and I'm just like, wow.
I really wish our justice system. Not to get into this too much, but you know, for people who are so clearly evil, Mel's just pure evil.
Yeah,
he's just pure evil. For those people, like, I think their sentences should be swift. However, I do agree in part because being on death row and putting someone, you know, like there have been innocent people who have been put to death as well. Yeah. So it's a really hard thing to kind of combat and balance. However, when you have compiled evidence of like John Wayne Gacy, you know, Ted Bundy, Ed Kemper, as I brought up before, these are real life serial killers, and a guy like Mel, I got to be honest here, and this might not be a popular opinion, but I say take them back like Old Yeller and put them down. Yeah. Like, don't let them have time to live.
Don't let them
No, because they have ruined, you know, they haven't just ended so many lives, but they've ruined families in that hole.
The community in general.
And that hole that so many people have in their lives when a loved one is gone, and not just gone, but murdered, and all that time they could still have left. Yep. You know, that was one of the glaring things watching this documentary on Netflix with John Wayne Gacy is like, I see the pain and agony 40 years later from a lot of these families who lost a brother, who lost a son to a psychotic serial killer. And like, I just have no empathy or sympathy for these evil human beings
Nope.
who should be put to death immediately for their heinous crimes. But yeah, you do bring up a good point. You know, like in the justice system, like when you have clear-cut cases like that, you gotta
where the evidence is just
overwhelming.
blaring. Yeah.
Like Gacy having 33 bodies buried under his house. It's like, come on.
Yeah.
Take that guy out back and save us some tax dollars and just put him away because he's a bad person.
Well, so death row now, so like in this book, it's obviously new age. How do they kill these people on death row? Isn't it the lethal injection?
Yeah,
they obviously do not do the chair anymore.
No, they don't do the electric chair. I think like a couple states do, but I think they give them the option or something like that.
The lethal injection.
But it is lethal injection very commonly. I think like 1 or 2 states still have hanging, but they haven't had an actual hanging in decades. Like no one's actually been hung, but yeah.
You can cut this out if you need to, but why don't they just do a bullet?
Yeah, I mean, it would save money. But then again, bullets are 50 cents, and are those kind of people even worth it, serial killers?
Lethal injection probably is more. Yeah, it is. Way more.
But it is a more ethical way, I guess, to put someone to death.
Is it?
I know. I don't know. I think they should suffer at the way that their victims suffered, but that's just my opinion. That's not how the law works.
You can cut that out if you need to.
No, it's fine. I don't think it's too grotesque. So anyway, Sam back to the story. Sam actually goes with her, and we brought this up many times. His sister had been killed by Melvin, the last victim.
last one.
And he had originally sought Gwen out because, he thought that she had helped her husband in all these murders, but since has been convinced that Gwen is actually a good person and all she ever wanted to do was protect her children. So Gwen and Sam's investigation leads to Valentine Rivard. This is kind of where the story kicks off, right? Mm-hmm. And he's this rich billionaire old man who is in a wheelchair. Who's in a wheelchair, and we come to find out that there was a private investigator. They went to this warehouse. They found him decaying. He was dead, unfortunately. And this was a really sad moment in the book. But good writing to kind of give you the sympathy for this private investigator. They found his wallet, and it opens it up, and there's a picture of his family in there, and it's just really sad because you realize yet another victim of Absalom, this horrible organization. Just completely unnecessary too. Unnecessary, yeah. And it's like these sick minds that do stuff like this. They just think human life can just be tossed out, and that for entertainment purposes. It's just so gross. It's so gross. But I guess we're suckers for the thriller mystery books. I really am. And, better to be written about than actual happen in real life. Yep. So anyway, they show up to this big old tower. They call it the Ivory Tower. And they meet Valentine Rivard because they said that they have information about this private investigator that they hired. Come to find out, Valentine's son actually jumped off the top of the Ivory Tower and committed suicide. And so what they are led to believe, that Valentine hired this private investigator to kind of investigate what was going on with his son. They believe that Absalom did this to Valentine Rivard and his family, and that he is also searching for justice. Oh, wait. His son? Yes, it was like a balcony, but it also had glass, and they said that the glass was inches thick. Yeah. So keep that in mind. Right, which is very interesting, isn't it? It'll maybe come back into play later. Maybe not. You'll see. But, obviously they show up, and what's very alarming about this meeting is Valentine actually shows them a video that appears to have Gwen completely helping Melvin abducting Sam's sister, putting her into a car, taking her out, bringing her to the garage. And Rivard admits that he believes that the film is faked. But the sheer shock of having Sam watch this, he is really now starting to second guess Gwen and being like, oh my gosh, did this horrible woman who I thought was just trying to protect her family, did she actually help? Was she an accomplice in killing my sister? Yep. And should I kill this woman right now? Yeah. So he's dealing with this conflicting issue. And I'm telling you right now, that's really hard. I mean, deep fakes are so good right now that the film could be and that's what they say in the book, is that we're going to have to wait for forensic evidence to look at this to see if it's real or not. Can I read this? Yeah.
So I don't know if this quote is within this area, but since we're talking about social media in the new age, it says, "You never understand how vulnerable you are in this age of social media until something breaks against you. And then it's too late. You can shut down Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. You can change your phone number and your email, move to a new place, but for dedicated tormentors, that isn't a barrier, it's a challenge."
Yeah.
And I was like, holy crap. So when they were describing in the book this video of what was happening, I could literally see it in my head. And just knowing Sam, and even though we're only in the second book, knowing like what kind of person he is and how much he loved his sister and how much he's fighting the urge to, he wants to be close to Gwen and her kids, but at the same time, he has that wall,
that reservation, of not knowing.
And knowing like this is somebody he's had dinners with them, he hangs out with her kids and stuff, and seeing that video, he probably believed it right away.
Oh, for sure.
And like, just imagine the pain that he felt in that moment. It was, it broke my heart. It was so hard to listen to.
Yeah. And then the book kind of jumps, and we go over to Connor, which is obviously the son of Gwen.
In his point of view.
In his point of view. And this is where the book, from book one, if you guys are following this on Audible, book one was narrated by the same person throughout the book. This narration jumps from like Connor to Atlanta. So there's a lot of different voice actors for narration, and Sam as well. Yeah. And meanwhile, we see Connor, he begins communicating with his father, Melvin, and he's using a phone that his father smuggled to him. Right away, guys, and if you're reading this book, you're scratching your head. You're like, Connor, I know you're only like 11, so I do have sympathy. And that was good, how Rachel kind of made you sympathetic to Connor. You didn't make Connor the villain. You've got to understand, this kid is 10 or 11 years old. And in trying to grasp and like understand everything that's going on, he's still in this weird way, and I don't blame the child at all because it's such a hard spot to be into, but he still wants to have that communication with his father. He still wants to talk to his dad.
He doesn't
understand or even know if his father is actually guilty, because when you have someone as manipulative as Melvin telling him, "No, son, this is not how it worked out. Your mother was responsible for a lot of it." You really do sympathize with this kid. I mean, being 10 or 11 is just really, really hard. And the author did a good job of not turning Connor into a villain, but more of a sympathetic character who just wanted that relationship with his father, whether that be right or wrong.
It's so sad.
So Melvin actually shows Connor the faked video in which Gwen appears to be helping with the murders. So now Connor is visibly and understandably upset at his mom too, because one, he's just saw this video, and two, his mother, quote unquote, according to his perspective, abandoned him to go hunt Mel. And Mel is being the more sympathetic, understanding parent at this point, as disgusting as that is, but it is true from the perspective of Connor. More so than Gwen is by kind of abandoning her kids, not really having communications with them, and going and hunting Melvin. And Melvin, being that psychological tormentor, kind of flips the script and is trying to set Connor against his mother, Gwen, in a very diabolical way, I would say. So he shares it. So Connor sees the fake video in which Gwen appears to be helping with the murders, and then he shares it with Lanny, which is his daughter, Javier, and Kezia. Oh, God. If I do that again, I'm never doing it. Okay, so Kezia, to be helping with the murders. So he shares it with all of them. And now they're seeing it, and it's a really emotional time now, because now they're all like, whoa, have we just been helping Gwen, who was complicit in all of these murders as well? Now everyone's starting to second guess Gwen, and Gwen's starting to literally lose her mind at this point, because now she knows that everyone's seeing this video, and she's just yelling at herself. She's panicking, understandably, and she breaks down, and she's like, "This is not me. I cannot explain this video. I don't know how this video came to be, but I would never help my husband do this. All I want to do, my ex-husband, all I want to do is kill Mel for everything he's done." And now she's got Sam, who was her former lover, her love interest. Now he's completely withdrawn from her. He seems very distant, understandably, again. But it's just a really, really sad way to start out this book because you feel for Gwen so much.
Well, even during like when when she saw the video when they were at what's his name, Richard or whatever, at the Ballantine.
Ballantine, yes.
When they were there and she was watching it, I loved her internal monologue where she was like, she was even second guessing herself. She was like, did I do this? Like, did I just block that? Like, you know how
memory
with people with trauma. Like, she was like, I can't remember if I did this or not. And I was like, oh my God, did she? The writing was so good, it convinced me.
Well, and then the psychological aspect of the book, I'm thinking, oh my goodness, is book 2 going to reveal that Gwen actually did help and then had some sort of like mind erase or like, you know, a blackout where she didn't even remember that she had committed all these atrocities. So yeah, again,
but then obviously I was like, no, she didn't. Because like...
Right.
There's other books.
So we get to this point now where Gwen's having this breakdown and, you know, Kezia and Javier tell her, hey, don't even return to the house until you can prove this video is fake because we might just arrest you on the spot.
Because they were all in the living room and that's when her kids were like, please leave.
Yeah, we don't even want you here, which has got to be just horrible. And Gwen has this dialogue with Sam because Sam's not really believing her either. He's very cold and distant, but they're still having this conversation. And, you know, Gwen just breaks down and she goes, at this point, my kids don't even love me, but I still want to protect them. But before anything else, she goes, they might not love me. They might not understand, but she goes, my one job now, I've lost everything that is important in my life. Mm-hmm. My one job now is to protect my children at all costs. And you got to respect that from Gwen because she's just been through so much at this point. It's just very sad.
The scene in the book where they were driving after the kids told her to leave and she was like, just pull over. Mm-hmm. And she got out of the car and he like came up behind her and gave her a hug. I felt for her, dude. Yeah. I mean, I've obviously never felt that kind of pain, but that writing was so well done during that scene. And then, do you want to talk about how she...
Yeah, so instead of running into traffic, which is what Gwen wanted to do for a split second, you know, she was like, I'm just going to end it all. It's not worth it. Then she gains her strength thanks to Sam's embrace. And Gwen tells Sam that she actually plans to use herself as bait to catch her husband. And she tries to make Sam promise he will catch that he will catch Melvin if she does trap him.
And if she does die.
Right. And so...
Wait. Okay.
Go ahead.
There was this quote after...
Here it is.
She said, Absalom has made me into the worst kind of enemy, one with nothing to lose and nothing left to fear. Yep. I was like, whoa! She's such a freaking BA, dude. Yeah, I love her.
And obviously at this point, it's very conflicting for Sam because he wants to believe Gwen, and you feel that in the book. But again, when your eyes see a video, and like if you don't really understand what deep fakes are, and forensics have not confirmed whether or not this video is completely organic, he is very conflicted at this moment. But he does, even though he's conflicted, he does not at all like the idea of using Gwen as bait.
Yeah.
He's very put off by that. But reluctantly, he does agree to Gwen's plan, and Absalom ends up calling him and offers to give him Melvin because, again, I keep going back to it, Melvin killed his sister, so they agree to give Melvin in exchange for Gwen.
Yep.
Now, Sam has obviously got his friend, his FBI friend who served with him, and his name is Mike Lustwig. We'll just call him Mike. And they're kind of doing a retcon and kind of observing what's going on. And Gwen is actually kidnapped. And Sam and Mike try to track down this van because they took Gwen, put her in the van, and Sam's panicking this whole time. He's like, is she dead? Is she dead? He's like, no. Mike's like, oh,
because when they dragged her out, she was not moving.
She wasn't moving.
And didn't she have like blood on her head?
Yeah, she had blood and everything because the guy whopped her a couple times. And they were very concerned, or I should say Sam was very concerned. Mike was a little more cool, calm, and calculated because he is an FBI agent, former military. And then they end up planting this tracking device on the van. But unfortunately, They chase him down. They try to pursue the van, but it does escape, and the tracker is thrown away.
Yeah. Oh my
So
gosh.
at that point, Mikhaili, what
I was stressing, dude.
Were ya?
I probably have like 5 new gray hairs during the scene. I was like, are you kidding me? This cannot be how the freaking book ends. I was so mad. I was like, why couldn't Mike just listen to Sam? Like,
Well, it makes for a good story.
it really does.
And Mike was more concerned about, catching Absalom as an FBI agent than he was. And that was a good contrast, too, because Sam just wanted to protect Gwen, more importantly than catching Absalom. But now Gwen's gone. Sam and Mike, they don't know what to do. Mm-hmm. But luckily, Sam remembers seeing an 18-wheeler, a semi-truck, with the name Rivard Lux on the side of the road when the van disappeared, and they realized that Rivard is not trying to stop Absalom, but is instead the head of Absalom.
Bum, bum, bum.
Bum, bum, bum. So now Sam's pissed, for lack of a better word. Now he realizes that Rivard Ballantine was behind this whole grand plan, and that he's actually just as evil, if not the most evil, because he is the head of this evil organization.
Congregation.
Yeah, organization of like just terrible people who murder and kill. And he tells Sam, or excuse me, he tells Mike that, hey, let's convise a plan here and let's go kidnap Ballantine.
Yep.
And at this point, Mike's like, you know what? This is the craziest crap I've ever seen in the FBI, and I've seen a lot of crazy stuff. He goes, I don't care about my career at this point. Let's do it. We serve together.
Yeah.
They're
buddies.
They've got that bond. They've got that military bond, which is very believable. So he decides, you know what? Let's do it. Let's kidnap them. And they actually devise a really smart plan. Mm-hmm. So instead of like going into the building and trying to find them, they notice when Gwen and Sam visited the Ivory Tower, they realized that there was a one escape route, that elevator, where you couldn't go in or out. It was essentially the exit of the building. And they devised this plan to set off to send in anthrax to then have the whole building evacuated. And they do evacuate the whole building. They've got the van, and they load Ballantine Rivard into the van. And unfortunately for Ballantine, stupid old man didn't realize that wasn't his normal driver in the panic. And then they drive off. They start to kidnap, or they do kidnap, I should say, and torture Rivard until he tells them where Melvin is holding Gwen hostage.
Yep.
And he says that Gwen will be killed by Melvin in this sadistic pay-per-view event special, expected to earn Absalom at least $500,000.
Yep.
So during this whole time, I'm thinking, oh my gosh, this plan is so crazy. This rich billionaire, like, it's so weird when people get that kind of money, and not all people, but they really do. Like, there's this mythology of like, they just, because they have everything. So all they want is absolute and complete power, which is really creepy. But then we go back to Gwen, right, in the book.
Yes.
And Gwen wakes up. She's drugged. Yeah. She's handcuffed. And this was so creepy. This was so creepy, Mikhaili. Because, go ahead. Go ahead and say what happens.
No. Okay. Here. Okay. I just need to say, during this, when we got Gwen's point of view and she was like explaining what was happening, I'll let you explain it, but during this scene, I felt so sick to my stomach. At one point, I'm not being dramatic. I genuinely like almost started gagging because I was like, this is so gross. Yeah. But this sounds really messed up, but it was so captivating. Mm-hmm. The way that it was written was so well done. Yeah. And it wasn't too over the top to me. And yeah, just you explain, because you do better at explaining things than I do.
So basically, Gwen wakes up, she's drugged and she's handcuffed. And she notices a warm body next to her. And Gwen's initial thought is like, maybe someone else is captured here with me. There's a lot of variables. But the one variable that sneakily comes up to her, and then she has an epiphany and realizes, oh my gosh, she turns, and it's Melvin right next to her, shirtless, taking a
Propped
nap.
up like this.
Oh, so creepy, just looking at her, being like, oh, you're awake now, Gwen. The last time we could both sleep in peace for the last couple of years. And I'm thinking, get away from me. Get away from me.
Well, before this, all of the contact that Melvin had with Gwen, he kept saying, like, stuff like, oh, you're cheating on me and stuff. And I'm like, bro, you're literally divorced.
Right. And then he would go psycho mode and be like, I'm going to kill you the same way I kill all my women.
So, yeah. Anyway.
Like a spawn of Satan. And she wakes up next to Melvin. She's panicking, obviously. And she finds out it's some random plantation house in Louisiana. Yep. And even though he tries to make her fear for her own safety and the safety of her children, she's like, you know what? You're not going to scare me.
Yeah.
You're not going to do it. Like, I'm over it. I'm going to kill you, Melvin. No matter what you do, no matter what you say, I will kill you. I will get my revenge, and you will not touch our children. Because Melvin is doing this psychological torment where he's like, oh, I've got you, Mel, but guess what I'm going to do? I'm going to find our kids, and I'm going to kill them, you know, and just doing all this crazy stuff. Talking about how you took my kids away. They love me. You're the reason why my children turn against me.
Such a crazy
and you
man.
are going to pay for everything that you've ever done, which is just extremely creepy and super narcissistic and psychopathic. But again, I mean, it's to be expected from Mel at this point. We know exactly the kind of individual he is. And she tells him basically, like, I will always be angry and I will fight to stay alive. And she does end up getting a little chunk out of him. She scratches him a couple times.
Yeah.
And, you know, he kind of looks at it and doesn't even really care. It doesn't really even faze him because he's, like, at this weird, like...
His, like, no pain receptors.
No, he's, like, at this weird evil point where it's just, like, too much.
He's so hyped up on, like, adrenaline and stuff that he's just going crazy.
So Melvin eventually takes her...
Oh, her hand is, like, shattered, too.
Yeah, her hand's broke as well, unfortunately, from the kidnapping that happened, and then obviously getting handcuffed and trying to yank, and her hand's all messed up. But this part's very interesting because Melvin takes her into this other room.
Like a studio.
Like the studio that we're in, except we don't do that kind of stuff. We just podcast. This is, we turn the camera around. There's actually, like, a dungeon and chains, and people it smells like decaying flesh, but ugh. No, that's not a funny joke.
No, it's not.
But no. So anyway, she takes him to the studio, and what's so creepy and what Gwen notices right away is that there are people around, but
like
they're acting like it's a movie.
Crew.
Yeah. But they're acting like it's a movie set, another guy on a job. She describes the cameraman as wearing a Hawaiian shirt, and it's like a real lighthearted thing. Meanwhile, there's a 19-year-old girl chained up to the wall.
Yep.
And if she doesn't use the pressure of standing up, then the spikes embed into her neck.
Well, doesn't the girl who's chained up, doesn't it look like Lanny?
It does look like Lanny
okay.
in Atlanta, which is obviously Gwen and Mel's kid. But it panics Gwen right away. And she's like, oh, my God, my daughter. And realizes it's not. And Mel just loves it. He's just like,
he loves it.
He's just like this evil supervillain.
So weird.
And he's, not to get too graphic, so I'll just say it like this. He's essentially like getting off, and it's pleasureful for him to see Gwen in such a panic and shocked state.
Yeah.
Which is pretty despicable. But it does look a lot like Gwen. And then, it looks a lot like Lanny. And then Melvin gives her an option, and he knows the option that she's already going to choose. Yep. This woman's up there. She's crying. She's emotional. You know, these spikes are very uncomfortable going into her skin as she's trying to hold herself up. And Melvin asks her, he goes, you know, Gwen, you're a stupid bee, blah, blah, blah. I hate you. But you have a choice right now. Save this woman. But in order to save this woman, you have to take her place.
Yep.
And I'm like, oh, okay. Well, of course, Gwen has nothing to lose at this point, so she ends up saying...
And he was like, she's just a worthless drug addict, blah, blah, blah. Like, he wants Gwen to take her spot, but at the same time, he's, like, degrading this other woman who's been kidnapped.
Right.
And I'm just like, bro, you are so messed up,
and this isn't outright in the book, but I started thinking about that and the psychology behind it. Because what Mel wants to do with the deepfake videos of her standing there, and we have to talk about the second deepfake video of her standing there passing the knife to him while she's smiling, right? And at this point, like, Sam's like pissed off about the whole thing. He's like, now there's 2 videos? But it starts to get a little wonky because who would be recording that, right?
It's not like Melvin's going to set up a camera.
Right. So then Sam's kind of thinking about that, and he's like, I don't know, but I can't really trust this woman because I just saw it with my own eyes twice now that she was enjoying it and smiling and having a good time. But anyway, the psychology behind Melvin in doing that is obviously he knows in that black soulless heart of his that Gwen obviously never helped him commit any murders.
Yeah.
But by telling Gwen that this woman's a strung out druggie, maybe a part of him also was like, well, either way I win. Because if she says no, kill her instead, then she is finally complicit in these evil, horrific games that Mel is playing.
Exactly.
So it's a win-win for him. And I think subconsciously Gwen knows that. But again, Gwen cannot stand there and watch this poor woman die after all the things that she's been through, after her children not liking her, no one believing her. So she ends up saying, you know what? I will take her spot.
Yep.
Pretty heroic thing to do, especially
really
when you know
is.
what Mel's going to do. And then Mel's very excited about that because now this pay-per-view is going to be selling more and they're going to make even more money.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. So she is able to wound somehow through this. She's able to wound Melvin.
It's a
wooden pike or stick or something. She stabs him in the eye, and she actually kills a guard and gets a gun from one of them, but knows obviously her husband's still alive. At this time, Sam and Mike show up because now they know where this place is at. And just at the last minute and tell Gwen that they saw Melvin, and hey, good shot, Gwen. We saw it. You shot him right in the eyeball. What a shot. That was really good. Really impressive. And Gwen's like, excuse me, what did you just say?
There's no way.
I didn't shoot him. I just stabbed him in the eye. And then they all together are like, you know, it's like reveal of a giant mystery. And they're like, oh my God. And just then Melvin comes in. He breaks down the wall or whatever, the door, kicks in the door.
And he goes for Sam.
And he lunges at Sam because he wants to kill Sam first because he's mad that he's with Gwen. Mm-hmm. And he lunges at Sam with a knife. But then Gwen, being the BA that she is, the warrior boss girl, turns and shoots Melvin 3 times. And she does actually. She turns the gun sideways and goes, "You want to smoke?" Pews him a few times. Melvin's then dead. And Sam finally believes it because then after the fact, they come to find out that the videos were faked. Forensic looked at the videos, realized that this wasn't original footage, that it was altered.
Deep fake.
Yep, and deep faked. And the novel kind of ends happily with Gwen and her children moving back into their house near Stillhouse Lake.
Yeah.
And all the people that doubted her, including the crazy neighbors that we didn't talk about in book 1, all the people in Stillhouse Lake, all the people in that community come out and basically apologize to Gwen. And they're like, yeah, we're really sorry. We thought you were a psychotic murderer.
I mean, yes, they do apologize, but they're still...
Well, yeah, they still keep their distance. I mean, there's
it's not like they're like, let's have a dinner party.
Yeah, there's a lot of skeletons in the closet still. A lot of things that they got to deal with.
You mean in the lake?
In the lake. Wow.
So dark.
That was dark. But I got to be honest with you. Pretty good joke. I got to be honest with Kylie. 9 out of 10.
Thanks.
9 out of 10. Because that was clever, creative.
It was
and
quick.
though very dark, it is a fictional book, so I will take it. Yes, it was. There was only a little bit of unease when Gwen checks the mail, though.
Wait, Sam is moving in with the family.
Oh, duh, yeah. Sam's moving in with the family. He said, I'm still going to kill you, Gwen. But no, I'm just joking. He's like, I still think you killed my sister. No, and it's really good because you see this healing start to happen with Gwen and Sam. I'm sure in the 3rd book, some other deep fake video is going to come out. Sam's going to hate Gwen again for the 3rd time. But as of right now, it's a happy family. Sam decides to move in. Connor and Lanny, they're ecstatic about this because this is like the father figure that they always needed in their lives.
Cute.
You know? And like Connor obviously needs that father figure.
He really does.
And Gwen knows that she can't give him that. She can't give him the same thing. And then Lanny... Atlanta actually gets a girlfriend, the girl that she's been hanging around with a lot. They come to fall in love.
Dahlia.
Yeah. So it's a very happy ending. However, Gwen goes out, checks the mail. Everything's tip-top magoo. Absalom might be dead now that, Ballantyne has been captured and all this kind of stuff. But then she sees a letter from Melvin. And obviously she assumes that someone else mailed it after Melvin's death. But it was in his distinctive handwriting is what she brought up.
Yeah.
And instead of reading it, Gwen weighs it, ties it to a rock, and says, you know what, Mel? This is how all your victims feel. This is how you're going to feel. I'm not even going to read this. I'm going to toss it into the lake. And that's exactly what she does. She doesn't even read the note because she realized that Melvin's not going to have the last say.
Yeah.
That she did. And she had the last say with a litany of bullets.
I was literally going to say she had the last say with the bullets. Bang, bang.
Bang, bang. And that's actually how book 2 ends.
Yeah.
So I'll because you did book 1, I'll kind of do book 2 and talk about my overall thoughts. So I told you some of my problems with book 1, which you guys found on the review, as far as some of the things being over the top. However, I really did actually enjoy book 2 in the sense that a lot more of the story made sense. I felt like I could get into the world more of like what Absalom is, because we do know the dark web and all the evil things that can take place on that. And I actually did enjoy this journey of Mel. And my biggest concern to you, I told you this after book 1, is I hope it's not so over the top that it's just none of it's believable. But I thought for the situation and for the story and the style of it, I thought this book 2 was pretty well grounded. And I actually give book 2 a 5-star rating higher than I did book 1. So narration aspect, I'm gonna go 4.5, 5 out of 5 stars. And then the story, instead of 4 stars like I gave Stillhouse Lake for Killman Creek, I'm actually going to give a 4.5. I actually enjoyed this story quite a bit, and I enjoyed the continuation. My only confusion is, where does the story go from here? It is baffling to me that there are still 3 more books. So I'm going to have my reservations here and say the same thing that I did after book 1, is I hope this doesn't get so crazy that it's not enjoyable for me. But I did enjoy this book, and overall, I'm going to give it a 4.5 out of 5. McKiley?
Real quick, I want to say it was narrated by Emily Sutton-Smith, Lauren Ezzo, Will Ropp, and Dan John Miller.
Yes.
So shout out to them.
Shout out.
I would give the story 4.5 just because I loved it, and I thought it was like the great amount. Whoa, that was not English. It was a great amount of like family drama, suspense, thriller. Like, I loved it. I thought it was wonderful. Narration, 4 stars. And what was I always forget what the final one is. Overall, oh yeah, solid 4.5. Okay. I loved this book.
Yeah, guys, if you are following along with this series with us, please be sure to comment below, like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell notification as we drop book reviews here every week on this channel. You can also find our Audible podcast on Spotify, iTunes, SoundCloud, Google Play, Amazon Music, FM radio, iHeartRadio, anywhere you get your podcast, guys, we are there. Thank you so much for joining us again on the Knight's Book Club podcast. My name is Mason Knight. That is McKiley Knight. And until next time.
Bye.